Welcome everyone to SFOX's interview with Rob, one of our very valued day traders. It seems we've overcome the technical difficulties now. One of the exciting but challenging things about this being our first live streamed interview, which we're really excited about. So
Right.
Rob, thank you for taking the time to be interviewed by us and for having us on your stream, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity.
So we're going to hopefully cover a lot of stuff today, from crypto to your trading practices to your experience with streaming. We've sourced the questions not just from the SFOX team, but also from the broader SFOX community, which we're really excited about. I know that some of them are watching the stream right now. So let's just dive into it. And before we get into the crypto and trading stuff, maybe I'll just ask you how you heard about SFOX in the first place.
Good question. I actually was just digging around in crypto Twitter in the early days, sometime in like early 2014, I want to say. And they just caught my attention. It was kind of just like a diamond in the rough, you could say. Like I could tell that they were a new startup. They weren't really big yet, but they had like this really huge vision that I thought would be amazing if it really like worked out. So I just remember taking a stack of funds and sending it over there, kind of taking a chance on them. And it was a great decision, actually.
Rob, I know one of the things that you mentioned before we started live streaming this time was that you basically used every crypto trading platform and exchange out there. So what led you after first exploring SFOX to continue using it to this day?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, I always had a great relationship with the support team. I kind of felt like I was a bit of the development process early on, being kind of like a beta tester, if you will. And I just saw that like there was a continued progression, right? Like it wasn't just a static platform that was just going to sit around and just be what it is, at that time forever. So that just continued to capture my interest and provide, more and more opportunities to make money in the space. So I just kind of graduated from like a side project to like my home base, I guess you could say.
So you mentioned that you value support. What other things do you look for when you're deciding which trading platform to use as a really frequent trader of crypto?
It's a good question. So yeah, definitely good relationship with support, but also security. I mean, for one, they're based in the States, so it's like they're close to home. And also just, having a good track record, with handling people's privacy and, their funds in responsible ways. And then also just offering like cutting edge tools, they kind of give you an edge over other traders out there.
Right on. So maybe we can pivot now away from trading for the time being, though we'll certainly go back to it and think about crypto more broadly. What got you interested in the space in the first place? I feel like people find their way to Bitcoin and crypto in so many different ways. So what's your story?
Yeah, for sure. Well, at the time I was a small business owner and I was running a website and I was doing some business on eBay and whatnot, just like online retail, you could say. And I started to have some difficulty with credit card merchants. I didn't have a lot of experience with them prior to this business, but it seemed that they had this like overwhelming authority with what I could sell and what kind of products I could even list on my site. And it wasn't as simple as like a product's legal or not. It was just a matter of like, if a product fits their risk portfolio and if they like the product I sell. And so often what it would become is more of like, we don't like your product, so we won't say you can't sell it. We'll just call you a high risk merchant and charge you like 5 times more than normal, right? And so I was paying like really outrageous fees, and it just became like a real burden to me, like I was making exceptions for these exorbitant costs. And I tried, dealing with different companies, and I just never really felt like I was being treated very well. So at some point when I heard about crypto, I guess it was really only Bitcoin that was really anything at that point. I just immediately became like fascinated with this idea of not needing them anymore. And even if in the beginning, I was willing to lose revenue over making the transition just to like have control of my business back, I guess you could say. So I just became a process of integrating it, and it ended up turning into a really cool opportunity where a like international marketplace opened up to me, because there was a lot less restriction for other customers around the world to get to me. So that's kind of how it all started.
And then at some point you made the pivot from using crypto and Bitcoin as a currency in your business to trading it full time, right?
Yeah, and it was like a slow transition in the beginning, but yeah, I started to see this, the value proposition of just like trading and speculating in crypto as being like even more lucrative than running my small business. So I kind of did make that transition, just phasing one out, moving into the other, at kind of like a slow and comfortable pace over the course of a year, maybe a little more.
So one of the things that's especially interesting to me about your background is that, at a time when a lot of the crypto industry is still so speculative, you've already had a lot of experience with the utility side of it, right? You've actually used it to run a business and you've seen its value in that regard, right? So I'm wondering your position on how the utility of crypto on the one hand interacts with its value as a trading instrument on the other hand, right? Because a lot of people say, look, as the market matures, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will become less volatile. They won't be as interesting as a trading opportunity, especially for day traders. So what's your take on that? As the market matures, do you think that it'll still be a good instrument to trade or not?
Well, I think it will. And I think that, you know, traders will find a way to make it good, whether it's derivatives products or whether it's, exchanges offering, different services. I'm sure that the speculative aspect of it will, indefinitely remain opportunistic. But as far as its relationship to like the utility, the price versus, what's happening on the ground, I'd say right now they're pretty untethered, right? It's largely speculative and there's a lot less people like everyday real world using the technology. Probably just a matter of time before that balances out a little bit better. It's probably just because it's such early days still that it's so disconnected. Like the market does appear to react to like fundamental news, but it's not necessarily the driving force of these movements every day.
What do you think has to happen before the use of cryptocurrencies becomes mainstream and it becomes more based on fundamentals rather than speculation?
I think that simply more people need to be educated about it, right? Like a lot of people just don't really get it yet. They even today, like people that have heard about it, almost everybody seems to have heard about it now, but it still kind of equates as just digital cash or digital money to them, which is kind of missing the point in a way. Like I think dollars are digital money still. There's a big difference between digital and like cryptographic. So education, once people become familiar and understanding of why it's important or advantageous, that'll spread into, a lot more interest around the world. It might just be through education, and it might be a thing where like it takes time for younger generations to kind of grow up with it being a reality.
Yeah, just like any new technology, like the internet or social media, right? Seems like once young people grow up with it, there's a whole new level of understanding that it reaches worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you look around the crypto space right now, are there any projects, big or small, that have you really excited?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm still excited about Bitcoin, pretty much more than anything else. As far as a trader, Bitcoin's actually not been the most interesting trade for a while now. But fundamentally, as far as what's happening with the project and the Lightning Network and user adoption and just all kinds of interesting features being brought to the table, I'm still probably most excited about that. But as far as other projects that are interesting to me now, as far as a trader, like I actually like Bcash, and I never really did before care for the project that much. But it's kind of like an inside joke in some of my trading circles. But we call Bcash like a 3x ETF for Bitcoin trading. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just way more volatile.
That's interesting. That's the first time I've ever heard it described that way.
Yeah.
Who needs ETF approval? We have that already.
Right. That's what Bcash is. It's definitely, it's like a leverage trade of Bitcoin.
Let me ask you something else before we move into the more technical aspects of your trading. One thing that a lot of people inside and outside the space say is that if you believe in something like Bitcoin long term, it makes more sense to just hold it than to day trade it or take on and exit positions on a regular basis, right? So how do you manage the different options there and decide whether to trade or hold? Like, what has led you to be a day trader rather than just holding Bitcoin and sitting on it?
Well, that's a great question. I do sit on a chunk as well. So like I employ several strategies, kind of a long-term hold. And then I got some funds allocated to swing trades of, a couple months or longer. And then as far as the day-to-day goings, that's there's just enough volatility and enough opportunity to do that. But for that to be your only approach to the market is probably, a risky endeavor. So for me, I just find balance in employing a lot of different strategies over different time frames. Kind of have a hand in everything.
Got it. That sounds like good advice. So you don't have to just pick one strategy. You can use a mix of them across your portfolio. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. That makes sense. Let me ask you, as we move more specifically into your trading history, did you trade anything before you started getting into crypto assets like Bitcoin? And are you trading anything besides crypto right now? How do you decide what to trade?
I actually was not a trader of any kind, speculator at all. I didn't know anything about markets or technical analysis whatsoever before I started. But having just seen the opportunity in it, it was the driving force to learn. And at times, I will bounce into trading other assets after the fact. So this kind of led me to become interested in trading the CME futures market. So I do that with the NinjaTrader platform, and it's pretty fun. It's a similar circumstance. It's a slightly different game, but it's kind of like I bounce back and forth, just depending. Like if crypto volatility is a little down, then I just kind of fall back to my swing trades, and then do like the futures platforms for the day-to-day. So it just gives me more opportunity, and it's kind of like another skill that I learned just by being involved in crypto. Is I can approach traditional markets as well with some of the things I've learned.
Sure, that makes sense. Within the realm of crypto, you know as well as anyone that there are so many different crypto assets these days, right? Even though, as you were first getting into it, Bitcoin was the only game in town. So with so many choices available to you, how do you decide which crypto assets and which pairs to trade on any given day? And if you're willing to talk about it, which ones are you actively trading right now?
Sure. You know what? That's a pretty simple question to answer, really. I mean, I just look at everything comparatively. I like to trade, as far as day trading goes, the thing that's moving around the most. So at the time, like say in this past week, really had my eyes on Bcash, Bitcoin Cash, as a really opportunistic asset to trade. And I'd say looking back just towards the beginning of the year till now, like Litecoin's really been my favorite coin. It's been incredible. It's kind of led the way. So I just look at whatever's moving around the most, whatever is the most exciting asset at the time, and that can just change day to day.
Fair enough. So you started trading a while ago, right? Did you put a year on it? Like, when did you first get into the markets?
My first purchase was December 2013. So it was kind of right after the bubble, the peak of the first major wave, you could say. And I kind of bought the downtrend and continued to buy it for a long time. And then there was a period of sideways, which was boring and frustrating. And I kind of feel like we're almost out of all the time that's passed since I started. I'd say that right now kind of reminds me of those days again, right? Like where we finally came down to a period of, sideways at a low, and now it's picking up again. It feels to me like $300 all over again.
That's really interesting perspective from someone who's been trading in the markets, I guess, coming on 6 years at this point, right?
Yeah.
But something else I'm interested in is, given that you've been trading for so long, how have you seen the overall market evolve in terms of the infrastructure behind trading crypto, in terms of the kinds of people and institutions who are trading it? How has that changed your experience as a trader?
Oh, I've seen a lot of changes for sure. Startups come and go, exchanges fall and rise, and all kinds of newcomers to the space. Also public interest, kind of comes and goes in phases. I mean, there was a period where it was the talk of the town everywhere. People that have no idea about investing or about technology were all interested in it. And at this point, I feel like it's kind of fallen back to more people that have a reason to be interested aside from just making money at it, which is a healthy thing, really. But yeah, I've seen a lot of changes for sure. Where we're at now, I mean, there's definitely more infrastructure, more on-ramps, and more things to do with your crypto, better types of storage, games and just other things you can do. So it's definitely expanded pretty quickly, in my opinion. And where it's at now is a pretty good place, I think, like where a lot of productive things are happening.
You said right now it feels like 300. As you look forward, given so much change happen already, where do you think things are headed next?
I'd love to say they're headed up, but I really don't claim to be all that prophetic about it. Like some guys have really long-term outlooks. I think it's safe to say that any outlook long enough up is in the picture, but as far as the next month or two, I honestly have no idea. And I don't try to pretend to know. I just basically go with what my strategy is, what my charting tells me. And it's mostly in the short term that I make these decisions.
Makes sense. Talking about your charting is a good transition into a whole slew of questions that the team had, more specifically about your trading philosophy and strategy. So before we dive into those, I know you talked already about how you kind of employ a medley of different strategies, but maybe you could just expand a bit more on your overall trading outlook and philosophy and the kinds of tools you employ.
Sure. I guess you could call me a volume trader. I know there's an endless world of like indicators and strategies to employ, but for me, I kind of found that simple is good, to not get overwhelmed with too many different things to look at any given time, because then you kind of like debate yourself over which ones to trust. So for me, I really just I study volume in different ways, and I just try to go with where the volume's going. So That can work on really short time frames, like, 20, 30 minutes at a time. And that seems to be, it works for me, basically. It's a matter of just finding strategies that kind of work for your own psychology. And, when I'm day trading, I just like to have like results that are kind of right now, like what happened today in my portfolio or what happened this week. But yeah, I'd say, I do use only a few indicators. I try to keep my chart pretty clean. I mean, you can see it on the screen here. Got your typical volume bar columns with its moving average. I've got something, it's a little more proprietary here, but this is kind of based on the Ichimoku cloud. It's just a little bit newer. It's a pretty awesome thing. I know the guy who developed it, but he calls it the Hefe cloud, and it's just like its own support resistance calculator in a way. And I also use the what's called the TS super trend. It's something you can find on TradingView, which I find has a lot of useful information. And then probably my singularly most favorite indicator is this VFI, the volume flow indicator. So in a sense, it's giving me a little bit more of an in-depth, kind of like precise view into what's happening up here as well. And that's about it. I really don't use a whole lot more. I like tensor charts so I can listen to it, and that kind of just keeps me from looking at screens too much. I can turn the volume up, leave the room, and I can hear when something interesting is happening.
Got it. Keeping it simple. I like that. That seems like a good philosophy for a lot of stuff. I know you talked a lot about the kinds of charts that you like and what you just said, but are there any specific things like different time frames or candlesticks versus line charts, things like that you prefer as you're making your trades or watching the market?
Yeah. Interestingly, when I started trading the futures platforms, I got familiar with something called open, high, low, close, and I really like those candle structures, right? Except I can't get that on TradingView, so I don't really get to look at crypto in that way. But I hope that I can someday. I hope that either TradingView incorporates that here or somebody else steps up, with a similar product that has it.
And what do you find especially useful about that way of viewing the market?
I don't know, it's just clean, I feel like you can identify the structure a lot better. But other than that, I mean, candlesticks are good. That's typically what I use. I think people use it, so it's a good default, a good place to start anyway.
Got it. Let me ask you, do you have any names of traders or analysts you follow closely or who have influenced your trading strategy as you've developed it over the years?
Yeah, I've bounced around, kind of watching different gurus, you could say, seeing what I can learn from them. I like a handful of people. Like, I try not to follow too many. It'll make your head spin if you do, because everybody has their own opinion at every moment of the way. But I like watching Tom Bayes. He's kind of a goofy dude. It's got some interesting opinions, but he's proven to make some great calls. His overall mindset seems to be pretty well in tune with this market. I also like some of the older legends like Peter Brandt. I follow him on Twitter, and I like to hear his opinion because he's like a 40-year veteran of legacy markets who kind of can't ignore this one anymore. And he has some interesting opinions about it. Sometimes some absolutely great calls. And other than that, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anybody that I watch on a daily. Yeah, I just follow a handful of guys on Twitter. So I'd say Tone Bays, Peter Brandt. I know there's another one. I just can't seem to think of them. But honestly, I get more stimulation being part of like a trading group, like a kind of a live analysis ongoing. So I'm in something called Whale Pool, and we hang out and just talk crypto and market theory all day. And I get a lot out of that because it's like interactive and up to the moment.
Sure, I can imagine being able to test out and discuss your own hypotheses and work things out with other traders is more useful than just listening passively to what someone else has to say about the market, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing about even that group, I mean, sometimes in the group there's some great calls and you get a lot of interesting perspectives. It seems like no matter how many different people look at this thing, they have their own way of doing it, right? None of us out of like 100 people, none of us really trade in exactly the same way. And I've learned to not really rely on anybody's calls. Just I like the additional perspective and insight, or hey, maybe I overlook something that's worth understanding. But I trade on my own calls more than anything. I don't like the feeling of like, oh, I followed him into a trade and it didn't work out. Now I'm upset about it. It's really a matter of me making the decision on my own every step of the way.
Sure. I know one of the things that a lot of traders, both newbies and more experienced people, struggle with is kind of the emotional aspect of trading. So it sounds like you're saying one of the ways to deal with that is to actually take responsibility for your own trades. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
That's good advice. I like that. Going more into the psychological aspect of your own history, maybe, I was wondering if you could talk about your biggest failure in trading and how you recovered from it and what, if anything, you learned from it.
Ooh, that's a good question. You know what I'll say? My biggest failure was probably a single incident that you could boil it down to just being too greedy, right? And I guess what I mean by that is like I've been very dedicated to this space and to this study for a long time now. And sometimes it's hard to get away from it when the opportunities just keep coming. And I think I was overdue a vacation at one point. And instead of like taking the vacation for what it was and putting crypto down for a week or two, I thought that vacation meant trading on the go while you're on the road and managing positions while you're doing other things. And that turned out to be a punishing decision at that time, which maybe spoiled the vacation for me a little bit. So I think the lesson learned there was, give it everything you got, but when it's time to take a break, like actually put it down. Sometimes a little space and a clear head is like a more potent tool than trying to make more money in a more difficult situation, like while you're traveling.
I know that so many people have issues with taking their work home with them, and I can only imagine that being a trader in a market like crypto that's always on and never closes like the NYSE, right? It's got to make it all the harder to just turn it off and close your positions and have downtime, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, good advice. On the other happier side of that, what would you say your biggest success has been as a trader, and what did you learn from that?
I'd say just being diligent, right? Like my entry to the space was a bit of a punishing one. I bought into a year-long downtrend. I waded through months of sideways. I kept I kept investing in the space, I guess you could say, without a great result, up front. So I think the success that I found was really just through persistence, and even after making bad choices, like looking at those as learning experiences and chances to grow. And another thing is just being at the right place at the right time, being on SFOX during times of high volatility where just like incredible opportunities open up for only short periods of time. It's like I just was in the right place, I was dialed in and ready to go, and then it came. So it could be a bit of a waiting game, for those like magical moments that maybe pay off months of like wishing or waiting around.
Sure. I'm sure a lot of traders can relate to that, especially when volatility in the market has been so wildly fluctuating from month to month, where at some point it'll be sideways and then there'll be a lot of movement, right?
Absolutely.
I wanted to pivot back for a second to your journey to becoming a full-time day trader, because you mentioned that it was a gradual thing that took a little while, right, to actually feel like you could be committed to doing this full-time as opposed to something like your retail business. So could you walk me through a little, like what made you feel confident enough in your trading to make the leap to doing this full-time? Was it one successful trade, a series of successful trades, something else in your psychology or life story? What inspired you to make that jump?
Yeah, quite simply, I think, at the time before I really made any money in crypto, I was juggling like multiple incomes. And I've always just been in this state of transition where it was like a job, as like a main source of income, and then a hobby, which was like a supplementary income. And maybe I enjoyed the hobby more than the job and kind of worked to transition into it. Well, owning my own small business was transitioning a hobby into an income. And then that became my mainstay and I let the others go. And then crypto came in and it was kind of the hobby. And basically at which point the income potential rivaled what my small business could do. That's when I started to feel safe about making like a more of a full-time. And it was a slow process. Like I kept a small business and just kind of phased it down to a comfortable to maintain level, and then kind of put the majority of my time into crypto and trading. And then at some point it just became like, why are you still doing this? Let it go. It's just, it's not worth your time anymore. So basically just, moving one piece at a time until it was like a comfortable transition, until I didn't feel like I'd be like losing out to make the shift.
It sounds like that kind of transition takes a lot of self-knowledge. I admire you for being able to just recognize when it's time to move on from one passion and one source of income to another. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Well, we've already gotten, I think, some really good nuggets of advice for new traders in everything you've said.
Awesome.
But I want to just give you an opportunity more explicitly, if there are people watching this or reading the transcript of it when we publish that, who are interested in day trading crypto or just starting their journey trading crypto. Do you have any advice for them? Are there common mistakes that you see new traders make that you want to advise them to avoid? What would you say to someone who's just getting into this?
Yeah, I have some tips for newcomers. Start small, for one. Develop strategies with funds you're willing to lose, however small they might be. Also, you got to forge your own path. Like, you can't just buy someone's technique, or you can't just copy somebody, because that's not really going to last forever, right? And then also you can't really hold them responsible for the results either. So it's about forging your own path that works with your own psychology, and at a comfortably slow rate to where you minimize the potential for serious loss.
That sounds like good advice to me. So we talked a little bit before about your perspective on the market and how you've been trading since 2013. So not since Bitcoin was brand new, but from the very early days of Bitcoin onward to today. So given your experience, I'm wondering what you think the differences are specifically between new, developing, and mature markets from the perspective of a trader. Do you trade those differently? Are there different factors or indicators that you want to consider? What do you see as the differences there?
Well, I guess new and emerging markets have kind of like a steeper slope, right? Where it's like more risk and more opportunity, right? And as they mature, they're, I don't know if I want to say more predictable, but they just offer a little bit of different sets of opportunity. And I think that like the markets, like the tools that give you the ability to trade the market successfully kind of like shift as well, like with different market types, right? Like, for example, there's not really anything you can trade on spot quite like Bitcoin that just has so much potential, right? Without being on leverage, without using like derivatives products and stuff. I mean, you mean like if you were to buy gold or something, it's just not that exciting of a trade, right? To like physically own the thing. But physically owning Bitcoin is pretty much a roller coaster of excitement and, you know, ups and downs.
So,
So
no, go ahead, please.
yeah, just you know, I imagine that as it matures and becomes like a more of a stable asset, that what'll come up around it is there's always going to be altcoins that are new, right, or younger projects that have that like exciting volatility that young Bitcoin had. And as Bitcoin itself becomes bigger, more stable, and maybe less interesting of a trade, there'll be more advanced derivatives products to like give you opportunity with it, right? Because like you can still make a lot of money trading gold, just not buying it with spot. So I think as far as like, you know, SFOX and like spot trading crypto, I don't know like how long, if ever, Bitcoin will, you know, be kind of a boring trade, but there'll always be something exciting on there. You know, some of the newer coins or the smaller caps, there'll always be like a good amount of volatility to capture in this in this space, this industry.
So you've talked about the roller coaster of excitement and emotions with owning and trading something like Bitcoin, and I know I can relate to that. I think the oftentimes true stereotype of trading something like Bitcoin is, you know, you take on a position and then you're immediately filled with like self-doubt and a bunch of negative emotions and stress. I know I can personally speak as a not that advanced trader to having like made a trade and then said like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that. It was a horrible mistake. Right. So as
Right.
who is much more advanced at this than I am, what are your tips for managing those emotions and keeping them from getting in the way of your trading practices?
Absolutely. So what I do is I've obviously managed and dealt with those feelings many times over. What I like to do is just, you know, make allowances for yourself to be wrong. It's probably wise to first assume that like the very next play you make will be wrong, at least for a period of time, right? So you have X amount of money to spend on a trade or an investment, just break it into pieces. You know, never go all in at one spot, because then you're like really fixated on like this one position and how far wrong you were. If you take that same position and say I'm going to average it in over like the course of 10 or 20 purchases, you have a lot more room to like, you know, average in at a better price. Granted, it's going to be a longer play too, right? Because you're not going to just like get all in at once and get right back out. But it's a safer approach, you know, where you can kind of like account for the fact that you're going to be wrong, and you're going to need time to be on your side, right? So, you know, breaking it into small pieces, approaching one position several times, you know, in different, whether you buy it higher later or lower later, averaging in. That's really the key. And the same for getting out. Because, I mean, there's nothing fun about holding a position for a month or something, finally seeing some profit, and then you sell it all at once and it just doesn't stop, right? So always hold on to a little bit of the other, you know, always hold on to a little bit of cash to spend, always hold on to a little bit of coin to sell, because you just never know what's coming around the corner.
Good advice. Good advice. So you talked before when I asked you about which traders you follow or have influenced you, about how you don't like to follow too many people, right? And I think even more broadly than following traders on Twitter or whatever, especially in the crypto market right now and over the last couple of years, there's just so much noise, right? From news sources to traders on Twitter to alerts of various kinds. So as a trader, right, how do you filter out the signal from the noise and figure out what you should be listening to, which chat groups are worthwhile versus what you're better off just being deaf and blind to?
Yeah, okay. Well, you know what I really do is I look at Twitter for entertainment purposes. That's my consideration of it. And while there's some really juicy stuff here and there, like I found SFOX on Twitter in the first place, and I found, people that know a lot about market theory, people that I've learned from. I don't necessarily go there for their calls. So I think the objective should not be to follow gurus. Maybe you learn about the way they think or the processes they use to make determinations, but it's not really about like, this is what they think is coming tomorrow. If you go down that road, you'll just eventually end up in a place where you're like resenting somebody or maybe yourself. It's about making your own way, like finding what works for your bankroll, your strategy, your time horizon, and learn from other people that are better than you or that are more experienced, but don't copy them. Learn what their magic sauce is, and then like work it out for yourself.
So as a newcomer, right, I want to just explore this a little more. Let's say I find someone and I am trying to learn from them. I know they have more experience than I do, someone like you, right? What would learning from them versus copying them look like? Like, how could I come to understand their strategy without just taking it and trying it for myself?
Yeah, like basically, like I mean, if you're looking at what I do, you're probably even using the exact same chart and the exact same time frames. You're probably not going to have the exact same inclinations, right? So it's a matter of like really learning how to read into what you're using, right? For me, I don't like to use too many different things that can kind of be confusing. You could even get like contradictory kind of outcomes doing that. Rather, just like get really comfortable and fluid with reading and understanding things that seem to work, right? Like for me, I have these few things that I use. It's not a really complicated chart. It's not overcrowded or anything like that, and it works really good for me. I've got a way to interpret it, and I don't think that everybody would interpret it the same way. Even if I went through for hours and explained like my thought process, you probably wouldn't come up with the same results or make the same decisions. So yeah, I don't know, exactly the best way to put it, but just, forge your own way basically. And, start simple, don't let all these things kind of like, there's so many different indicators and strategies and methods that people use. Like find something that just works for what your goals are too, like maybe you like to make long-term trades that ride for a long time. And if you did, you probably wouldn't want to look at my chart. It's not going to help you much in terms of like catching a move here in the next couple hours and closing it out before the night's over. My setup works pretty good for me. So you got to kind of calibrate things between like what your expectations are, your time horizon, how much energy you have to put into it. So
Sure. So it sounds like it's kind of a combination of understanding other people's strategies and tactics, but then also understanding your own goals and learning to develop and listen to your own instincts.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it.
Cool. I like that. Rob, I don't know about you, but I'm someone who has a lot of pet peeves, especially in like areas or disciplines that I work in a lot or I know a bit about. So as a trader, do you have any pet peeves about like really just bogus claims that you see people make all the time about either the crypto industry or trading crypto, things that everyone repeats on Twitter or online or even in person that just aren't true?
You know what? Pet peeves, not so much. I mean, I guess being in the space for so long, you learn to kind of filter out a lot of jargon and stuff that's not really relevant to what I do every day. So I try not to fixate on it much, but I mean, yeah, there's plenty of wild and crazy opinions about crypto. And there's plenty of evangelists out there that have a lot of negative things to say about the space. And I just kind of perceive them as people that maybe missed the point, you know. The more you know about it, the harder it is to argue against it. I mean, even if just in the philosophical sense of what the technology represents, it's really hard to hate things that offer people more freedom, you know, and more privacy. So you start to really wonder what their incentive is, you know, what motivates them to be, you know, to stigmatize it in this negative way. And it's either a lack of understanding or, you know, maybe some kind of regret that they missed the boat in a sense, or maybe it's that, you know, they have an agenda that's kind of capitalizing on the way things are now. So that's why I just kind of like, rather than fixate on the negative stigmas and like the older crowd in the space that has that kind of looks down at it, I like to look to the younger generation, like think about things like the way that kids would embrace this technology. I think that's really where it'll like lift off, is like people that are just born into the world where Bitcoin's already a reality and is already a viable solution to like all kinds of financial endeavors.
Sure. Well, to the children always, right?
Right.
Moving back to some more specific trading stuff, you know, you talked before about thinking about your time horizons and goals and things like that. What kind of goals do you set for yourself in your trading, whether those are daily, weekly, yearly? And then what are your practices for keeping score on those goals, or making sure you've either met them or failed to meet them and adjusting your strategies accordingly?
Okay, that's a good one. Well, basically, my ultimate goal is just to earn a living, right? So I could set the bare minimum is to pay all my bills and have a little disposable income every month. And for me, that's not really a huge challenge in this space. So I look at it kind of like I maintain X amount of trading capital. And as that, as my balance gets beyond it, I take a little off and use it to live and pay for things, and just kind of always revolve or resolve it back to that baseline amount. And you know, if things kind of come slow for a while and I don't, you know, necessarily hit the goal, hasn't seemed to be a problem even in this bear market. If that is the case, however, then I'll just reanalyze my approach to what I'm doing, right? And you know, if necessary, I'll even budget my lifestyle a little bit differently to compensate, because there'll be times where it's incredible and there'll be times where it's boring. But I guess, you know, the ultimate goal is just to come out on the other side ahead in some kind of consistent way. And markets never really tend to work like in a way they give you consistency, right? So it's kind of a quandary to want that from something that doesn't necessarily give it to you. You have to be the difference that kind of compensates for it. It could be like you have one absolutely awesome month out of a year, and the rest of the time you're just kind of honing in your trade, you know, learning your craft a little better. So try not to set my goals too high, but also, you know, be as opportunistic as possible in the safest and most practical manner that I can.
I like what you said about the markets not being constant, so you have to be the difference, because you come off as someone who is very relaxed and at peace and calm, and I imagine you have to be in light of what you said, right, with the markets fluctuating so much.
Yeah, you gotta have that. You gotta be able to keep track on your emotions. That's for sure, because that's the one thing that'll tear you apart. You know.
Absolutely.
SFOX actually was there from some of my best and worst experiences in this market. I remember, like I said, how this reminds me of the $300 days. Well, there was a period where, we came down to down to those lows, and it kind of held for a while, months of sideways. And then there was like a final test of the bottom, like the bottom. And I was there for it. I remember the price slipping through the threes and through the twos and then under two. And I mean, mind you, I started investing at like $1,000. So I'm 5X under at this point on at least on my highest purchases, right? I just remember getting to a point where I didn't know if I could handle it anymore, right? I bought this thing that like fundamentally seemed so promising. Like, how could it possibly not be worth more than it is? How could it possibly not be going up? And I remember being challenged by the fact that it was not going up for at least a year. And anyway, we hit these lows and it just kept dipping. And I was just like watching my account be kind of like massacred. And I'm having like these regretful thoughts of like, why, who am I to think I'm some like great speculator? And what are you doing like investing in this unproven space? And I had all these like very like personally challenging thoughts. And it was literally at like the lowest point where I was about to like start getting like, I don't know, like very angry, right? I was about to lose it. And it was about at that lowest point that all of a sudden, like the biggest opportunity I'd ever faced, like just hit me right there. Like it kind of just bottomed out. I want to say it was like $165 or something at the time. And there was just this explosive rally that came to follow, like out of nowhere. And in that time, like SFOX's potential with the arbitrage and mixing multiple exchanges into the order book, it finally did it. It finally like happened. And there was like this huge gap. And I was just like able to kind of cycle my account a couple times and make a few like really big trades. And it was like this really sporadic, like crazy, unexpected circumstance, like right when I was at the brink of like just giving up on this whole thing. And after the dust settled, I was sitting there looking at my balance and it was like the highest it had ever been, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, like patience really pays, like I almost couldn't handle any more pain. And then like opportunity came, and that whole like year was suddenly very worth it. So, I mean, you might not run into that circumstance anytime soon if you're getting started in the space, but like I said, it's about timing, being in the right place at the right time, and being patient and being able to manage your emotions. After that, I kind of learned that like all I had to do was wait, just be there when the time was right. And so just keep your finger on the pulse. Those moments will come again, I'm sure, because I've seen many more of them since then. And like there's been just singular days that made an entire a year's worth of being in this space worth it. So timing has a lot to do with it, and patience, staying collected and looking at the bigger picture over the long term. Those kind of opportunities will come if you're invested enough into it and you're aware enough of what's going on.
That's a great perspective. I love that. On the other side of that, thinking about your exit strategy, some members of the team were curious about your preferred way of exiting trades. Like, do you do it all at once? Do you use trailing stop losses? Do you have predetermined profit loss? And do you use strict rules for exiting, or is it more of a flexible strategy in when you decide to enter and exit positions?
That's a good question. It really depends on the circumstance of the market, like what kind of trade I think I'm entering. But I do have like a cutoff, I guess. And I'd say like I kind of determine ahead of time, like how deep into a position I'm willing to go. And then I never enter that position in full, all at one spot. So I give myself a lot of leeway to accept some pain. But I'd say generally at which point I lose like 10% of the total like trade value, I start thinking about taking an exit, right? And like as far as my emergency cutoff, right? Because I don't really want to lose like any more than that. And it's going to actually take a great degree of volatility for me to lose that much after having averaged in. So it doesn't seem to happen all too often, but I would say I have like a dynamic approach to it for sure. As far as entering and exiting, yeah, I definitely do some scaling in. I like to limit out like nice and easy into strength. That's usually my kind of way. And I always retain a little piece too, you know, like at least like 5 or 10% of the total trade value. I always like hold on to it until it's like, you know, I'm absolutely either happy with the proceeds that are coming my way, or I'm like really convinced that like whatever rally is over for a while. So yeah, just trying to be flexible with it, not taking too serious or strong of a position at any given time. And yeah, it seems to work for me like that.
Got it. Got it. The last technical trading question that we have for you: how do you determine directional edge, and are you able to quantify it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say for sure, just, you know, examining like higher time frames and moving averages is kind of like a most basic way to do it. But as far as it just depends on what time frames I'm looking at, but that's kind of what I use this cloud for in a way. I mean, I'm kind of zoomed in here on like a 24-minute, which for whatever reason, I like to use somewhat odd time frames. Most people probably look at like a 15 or a 30-minute. I look at a 24. I find it gives me, for whatever reason, it gives a really good outlook on things. But yeah, I'd say that I just use my my basic layout here. I mean, I use the cloud. It's kind of like an easy way to determine what's going on at a glance. You know, that's the whole idea with it. It's like a quick look, and it's like you have a determination of which direction things are headed at in the right now. Anyway.
Got it. Now the last series of questions I have for you, Rob, given that, again, we're fortunate enough to be talking on your stream right now, is about your experience with streaming. So to jump into that, I was wondering if you could just say a little bit about what got you into streaming in the first place.
Yeah, okay. Well, I started my interest in it as just like a viewer. It's sometimes trading can be a bit of a lonely process. So look for some stimulation. It's kind of fun to hear people's thoughts or watch them, you know, do whatever they do, whatever their craft might be. So I just was a viewer for a long time. And I considered doing my own channel. I have a handful of skills that I think people would be interested in, even more popular ones than trading, you know, like music or gaming or something. So I just was a fan, I guess you could say. And really the only thing that turned me off to the whole space or to the streaming thing was just the platforms themselves, you know, like kind of predatory, you know, like Twitch makes you watch all these ads and then you pay to subscribe and you still have to watch ads, and they take a huge chunk of the revenue that these streamers could be making. Well, I understand that they deserve to get paid for their platform. It just, I didn't really like it enough to want to be a streamer, I guess you could say, right? I dabbled in it a little bit and just, it wasn't really me. Well, then this DLive thing comes out, which is pretty new. And it's like a blockchain powered, you know, service that's like, it's really sweet, you know. Just the model is far different than any of the other ones right now. And it's like, it's all cryptocurrency, you know, funded, and there's no advertisements, and streamers get pretty much everything that they generate. And I think the way that the platform makes money is, you know, as it grows and takes off, the demand for their own token will fruition, and therefore like them being stakeholders in it, they'll make some good money in the process. But it's a cool way to do it. It kind of trims out a lot of the fat, which is like a lot of the whole point behind crypto, is to eliminate unnecessary middlemen in transactions. So, you know, it's really like kind of living up to the point of crypto in a way. You know, it's also a cool way to get people interested in it, right? Because there's plenty of kids that like game, or, you know, people that have reasons to stream that weren't necessarily interested in Bitcoin for any particular reason. And then now all of a sudden they are, because like, you know, they're on DLive and they're getting, you know, the platform's like really interactive. You can do more as a viewer, right? Like you can interact with your streamer on a more in more involved ways, I guess. I mean, there's tipping, and you know, you can insert links and GIFs, and there's just all kinds of ways to kind of interact with the streamer. But the point being that this is like getting people familiar with the way cryptocurrencies work, and with having a little bit more control over their own enterprise. So whether you're a streamer or a viewer, it's kind of more interactive, and it's a different thing. And then ultimately, when it's all said and done, you know, you're earning like a native token that's just specifically to DLive, but you get paid out, and you have the choice of paying out those tokens in PayPal for USD or in Bitcoin, just to like a wallet drop. So I think it's an awesome way to like utilize the power of blockchain tech and to gain people's interest in the space overall. And it provides a really awesome platform for streamers and viewers. So it's a win for me, and that actually is like a reason to get involved in it, you know.
And it sounds like, going back to where we started the conversation, it's a great case for the utility of crypto-based projects too, right? Because here you are, a guy who would not have gotten into streaming with traditional streaming technologies, but crypto makes the value proposition such that you were actually willing to do it and provide it to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I like it enough to where it's fun to participate in it as a viewer too, right? Like I follow people and I enjoy like tipping them and encouraging them to do what they do or get better at it. You know, it's a rewarding experience, I feel like, for everybody. And it's new, so it's kind of got this like fresh excitement all over again in a way.
Sure, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you, Rob, I'm an avid gamer in addition to being interested in crypto, right? So it makes me excited that you're into gaming and streaming gaming in addition to trading. I'm just wondering, given that you have both of those experiences, do you feel like crypto traders can learn anything from gamers? Like, how do you see those two industries and practices intersecting or not?
Yeah, you know, this takes me back to being a kid when your parents tell you playing video games all day is never going to amount to anything. Oh, yeah? Well, guess what? Because this is kind of a game. I mean, it's game theory. You know, it's about gaming other people. You know, it's about gaming the market, and it's about kind of conquering yourself in a way. Like all the emotional hurdles and, you know, threats of loss and fear of, you know, failure. It's very much like a game. And I think as being a gamer in the past, there's a certain element of like hand-eye coordination involved in actually executing trades. Like, especially on SFOX, I mean, I've kind of called it the sharpshooter, or the first person shooter of like spot trading. You know, like it's rarely made sense to like do high frequency trading with spot on any other platform type of thing, right? Like where you're in and out of positions in like really short periods of time. And it works on here when the situations are right. So being good at having experience with gaming and being like quick with the coordination, and a lot of times you can have the right idea, but you fail in execution, right? Like this is a problem I hear people encounter all the time, like in my trading group. Like oh, I was in this perfect position, then I hit the wrong button and I had the, opposite effect. And these kinds of things really happen. So yeah, I mean, a gaming background is kind of advantageous in the sense of like being quick with the computer, being familiar with the keyboard, like knowing how to use hotkeys and macros, and just having like proper execution, basically, like in the moment performing when stress is high and like you're computing a lot of things all at once. Gaming background is definitely an advantage here.
That's a really good point about stress management. I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, I'm actually playing through this new game, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, now, by the guys who did Dark Souls, and it's all about like, performing under pressure, right? So that really rings true. The idea that games teach you to manage that and perform at that level of just insane stress, which can only be good for trading, right?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of it is performing under pressure and in the moment,
Yeah, I like that. Let me ask you one thing that I wonder about is how you as a streamer maybe approach trading platforms differently than if you were just trading on your own, right? Because you want it to be set up presumably so that other people can actually watch you as you're trading and it's a good experience for both you and them. So does that lead you to value different aspects of a trading platform or look for certain features that you wouldn't care about otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, putting on a good stream is like, I don't know, there's definitely an art to it, right? And I guess there is to trading as well. And I'm still searching for that like perfect like blend, I guess. Like to have a show or a stream that's like productive, like in the sense that like people could get inspiration from it, or maybe learn some tricks, some tips, whatever. At the same time, it's like exciting to watch. And to be honest, like I don't know, I've been on here for less than a week. I got like 50 something followers, and it seems to actually be growing at a fair rate considering like how sterile my show is so far. I mean, it's not all that interactive, and I'm still learning about like overlays and doing things to make it more interactive with the audience. I'll develop that out in like weeks to come, but ultimately, you know, I'm trying to find that like middle ground, and I'm trying to work with SFOX team as well to like make this as exciting as it could be to watch. And it's kind of funny because a lot of times people would be happy just to like watch some cute girl chat, and they would like to learn how to make like tons of money at home with no boss. So ironically, it's a certain crowd, I think, that'll go for it. But I need to take the steps and research all the outlets I can to like make it seem exciting to watch, right, or to experience. Because to me, it's incredibly exciting to trade, like the feelings and emotional rush you get and stuff. It's exciting, but to watch it as an outsider who doesn't even know what some of the stuff means, I could see that it's like, what is this even about? Like, let me find something else. So I'm still searching. I'm sure in time I will kind of come up with a formula that's like satisfactory, but it's a learning process still. So we'll see.
It brings to mind, though, that comment you made earlier about education being so important in moving crypto forward, right? And it seems like if someone were to stumble across your stream and maybe not know everything that's going on, that's also an awesome opportunity for you to educate them and maybe get them excited or engaged with this thing that they never would have known about otherwise, right?
Yeah, I like that for sure. Yeah, because I mean, I'll be someone that you can ask questions and talk to, and it's like, you want to ask me what I'm doing or what I'm looking at. Yeah, I've got answers for people that are interested.
Yeah, and you're very personable and easy to ask those questions of, clearly. So I think you're the perfect person to be an evangelist for all of this.
Appreciate it.
Of course. Well, Rob, those are all the questions I have for you. Was there anything else that you wanted to say or speak to before we sign off here?
Yeah, I love your shirt. When can I get some?
I have hats too. Let me show you. See,
Damn,
it's a hat.
hook it up. I should have had one ready for the show.
Yeah, man. Oh, we'll hook you up. Don't worry about that. I'll get the right people on it.
All right. Well, yeah. Aside from that, yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully we can work together some more. Yeah, I really love the SFOX brand and the product and actually the staff. I mean, everybody I've worked with, I've met Akbar. I've worked with George, countless hours online on things, and Daniel Kim. He's always like my right hand guy. Like if I have a question or concern or anything, he's like always available, like any time of night. So yeah, just the response I've had from like working with the people that are part of the team, it's been outstanding, really.
Well, and on our side, I know it's been a pleasure for all of us to have you as a customer and to be able to pick your brain for stuff like this. So thank you so much for using us and for being so generous with your time and thoughts.
Oh, I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Of course, man. All right. Well, I think that's all I've got. Thank you again. I'll definitely be in touch as we get ready to share this on our YouTube channel and write up the transcript and share it on the blog. I think people are really going to love it. I hope the people watching the stream really enjoyed it. I know I learned a lot and had a great time.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Rob. Well, thanks again and be in touch. All right.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye.